Hey folks. So I'm going to try and get this toothbrush video for you guys. I wanted to get it done last night, but 6:30 to 10 p.m. is a long day, and I hadn't even eaten, so I was exhausted, and I just had to get some sleep. But anyway, so what I did yesterday, I'm actually in the classroom. If you happen to see me out there, feel free to come in. And so all I've done here is, triangulate, mesh, triangulate, and then mesh smooth my cape. And then I grouped it. Again, the scale group, I might rename that, but I am grouping this, both of this geometry together. And then I created a geo group, which will likely stay as is. But instead of, as the book says, instead of putting the deformer directly on the geometry, I'm going to do it on the scale geo group. In fact, I've already done that. I have my bend handle. You can see it in there as I did in class. And I have my low bound and my high bound. I'm going to hide my, and actually I'm going to take my geo group and I'm going to move, actually I'm going to move that and the bend handle. Control click that. I'm move this up because when you're doing your rig, you want your character to be standing on the ground plane. And so I'm just going to do that just to stand him up there. And then I'm going to hide my grid. So anyway, I have my bend handle. I've centered it in my character. You can see that on the side view. There it is, dead center in the neck of the character. And again, what we want this to do is we want this, if I activate curvature, to bend forward, and it's doing it for both the character and the cape, right? Now, I want this, and again, I'm starting on chapter 2. This is literally all in the book. It talks about the bend deformer. It talks about the squash, the wave. We're going to use all of those. Except for the lattice. It talks about the lattice and the cluster. It goes over stuff. But on page 24 is where the super toothbrush actually starts. It actually starts with the twist. I didn't realize I was on the wrong thing yesterday. I was trying to quickly power through it. So what I'll do is I'll delete the bend handle. We'll come back to the bend handle. I want to do this in the order that it's in the book so that it's not any more confusing than it has to be. But I'm still going to use the geo group for my twist deformer. And the reason that I'm starting this over is because the order in which you apply these deformers matters, right? How it affects the character it matters in the order that you apply these deformers, these nonlinear deformers. And I'm just going to go to deform, nonlinear, and I'm going to pull off this list because we're going to use bend, we're going to use squash, twist, and wave. We're going to use 4 of these, okay? So the first one we had was twist. And again, with the scale geo group, and they all work very similarly, so there's not really a whole lot of difference between them. On the scale geo group, I applied this, and it applies the twist. If I do this end angle, right, it applies the twist to wherever the center line of the deformer itself is, right? So if I take this after I've activated it and I move it over here, you'll notice that it starts to get, you know, onto the body itself. I'm going to take this back to 0 so that we can have a clean look at this. But again, I'm going to apply this to the center of my character. Okay, I want to be really anal about it. I want it in the middle of the handle, dead center on the handle, right? And I want the twist to be on the neck. Again, this has a start angle, which twists the bottom, and an end angle, which twists the top. And just like we saw with the deformer, I'm just going to apply that. I have a low bound and I have a high bound. And it's, again, I'm just applying this I'm selecting the word and then I'm middle click dragging over here. You can also do this just by clicking and dragging here, although it works a little bit differently. It's done incrementally, right? So, so I want this twist to be just in the neck, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my low bound to 0. You can't go any higher than 0 on the low bound, and you can't go any lower than 0 on the high bound, right? So I could take that down to 0 and we have all the twist in one little point. I don't want to do that, but I'm just saying. So the twist on the neck of the character is going all the way through the head. So if I take this down to like 0.5 or something like that, the head does not twist, but it's still twisting up through the body, and I want it all to be in the neck, right? So I don't have to leave this where it is. I can actually move it up so that it aligns with the base of the neck, and then I can take my high bound and bring it down to somewhere around 0.2, 0.3, 0.35, 0.4. I'll do 0.35, right? Just so that we can see all of the twist is applied within the neck itself, right? And if I use the end angle, then it's just him turning his head from left to right, which is what we're looking for, right? And again, this is basically on page 25 on that, right? So I have the twist. And what I want to do is I want to use only the end angle attribute, similar to what we did on the trophy, right? And again, the trophy, you know, for those that got lost during the whole trophy thing, that's pages 1 through 10 or something like that. Like the trophy is literally right there at the beginning of the book. So you can't miss it, right? The only thing that you might not have followed potentially is the curve creation and stuff like that, right? I'll go over that after I do this, just for the sake of having that in a video for you. So the only thing I want to use control-wise is this end angle, right? I'm going to zero that back out to get it back to default. So similar to what I did for the trophy, I'm going to select all these other attributes, and I'm going to lock and right click, lock and hide selected. So the only attribute I have available is the end angle, right? I could lock and hide these. I don't want to yet. I just want to make sure that there's somewhere that there's let me fix my settings on this so it doesn't ask me to leave because y'all aren't here. There we go. It won't interrupt me again. So I may have to apply something to this positioning or grouping or whatever. So I'm just going to leave this part alone. I'll come back and clean that up after I'm done, right? So the next deformer that it applies is the bend deformer, right? We've already played with that before. And I'm going to, again, select my group, not the geometry, and do the bend deformer. Again, it centers on the geometry that's selected, and being that, the cape is a part of that, it's halfway through the cape. All I have to do is go to my side view, line that up again. And if you remember from yesterday, we wanted to do a -90 rotation on Y in order to get it to face the right way. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, -90. And again, when I do my curvature, now there's two curvatures. One is on the shape node, right? One is on the inputs. The one we want to control is on the inputs. The shape node is highlighted yellow, which means it's tied to another attribute. That attribute happens to be this attribute, right? So it's a little confusing as to which one. This one won't work. This one does, right? Okay. So you can see it's bending the right direction. I simply have to set my low bound to 0. And I can set my high bound a little bit taller if I want. I'm going to play with the curvature and let it and see how it looks. And honestly, I'm kind of happy with how that looks, right? He's bending in his spine, give or take. I could potentially move this down a little bit if I want to lower that and set my high bound a little bit taller, 1.2 or something like that, 1.1, just to make sure that it's going through the head. Give him a nice bow, right? On the opposite end of that, I can have him lean back, right, through his spine. If you want to make that go a little bit lower and with a longer high bound, that's fine. It's up to you. As long as we get the right general look and it's not doing the whole character, this is fine, right? I'll zero that out. And again, our only level of control is going to be curvature. So I'm going to highlight the other three and lock and hide. And we'll come back to these if we need to, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do the squash and stretch. And this is so that the character can squash down and leap off, dynamically and all that stuff. I'm going to, again, apply this to the scale geo group. And it's called squash. And again, squash works very similarly, right? By default, it's back here. I want to move it in. Go ahead and pull that in. And how does this work? This one has also a low bound and high bound. It has a smoothness. It has a max expand position, which is how far can it expand. And the control for this one is factor. Now you can see very obviously that his feet are lifting off the ground. It's expanding and squashing from the center of his body, and we want it to expand and squash from the feet, right? We want him to be able to squat down and not lift off the ground when he does. So again, we're going to take this and we're going to move the center of this deformer down to the feet. And if we want to, we can do a grid snapping, or we can do a vertex snapping and move that, straight to the bottom. Either one will be fine. But again, if I do the factor, it's not really giving me, it's still doing the low bound. Technically, even though I can't see it because the character is centered in the center of the manipulator, is standing in the center of the manipulator, I don't really need this low bound. So for the sake of that, I'm just going to bring that up here. And let's see if that changed things. It changed it a little bit. It made the center of the stretch, or squash, I should say. It made the center of it a little bit above the feet, which is, which is good. The cool thing about this is I can take this and I can manipulate the start smoothness. You can see how if I bring that up to 1, it has a little bit of a blend with the original shape, or I can do the end smoothness, same thing, right? But my high bound is not really as high as I want it to be. I'm going to bring that up just a little bit to give it a little bit of additional squishy factor. And I'm going to play with my factor, squash, and stretch. Really nice, right? What does expand do? Expand is how far do you want to expand, right? So if I wanted to do breathing, I could play with the expand node. Envelope is simply, is it being applied or is it not, right? If it's on 1, it's applied. If it's on 0, it's not, and halfway in between, right? So on this one, it's saying in the book, lock everything but factor, which makes sense. If you wanted to keep expand and play with that, you could do that technically. But I'm going to follow this. And if you want to set a max expansion position, oh, actually, this is kind of cool, right? You can play with this in a way where it looks like they're doing that thing in old school cartoons where they lift up their belly and drop it to the ground when he's like determined and angry or something like that. If you think about Peg Leg Pete or just Pete in later versions of Goofy, like Goofy Movie and stuff like that, lifts up his belly and drops it and it squashes down to the ground. This would do a perfect thing. He's like, and then it rebounds, right? So if you wanted to keep that or something like that, that would be fine also. But I'm going to take those. I'll go ahead and just take the rest of these as well and lock and hide selected for that. Set my factor back to 0. And we're good on that. So you can see that, applying these is fairly simple, right? Most importantly, what we're hoping for is that they work together, right? If I select the twist handle, you'll notice that the twist handle has the twist input, but it also has bend and squash, right? So whichever one you've applied, it'll have the one that's been, or the ones that have been applied after that available as well. So if I select twist being the first one, I can activate that and then go here to bend and activate that and go here to squash and activate that. And it all works together, right? If I did this in a different order, it wouldn't look right, So that's kind of nice that you can access all 3 of these at the same time. Zero that out. Now, the last thing we wanted to do was play with the cape. And I'm going to take these actually. I'm going to see if I can group these and see if they still work. Sometimes if you group them, depending on how you deal with it, it might not work with the geometry still. I'm going to create a deformers group. And I'm just going to see if I've messed up my work here because I like to keep things organized. Still works. Let's test all 3. Yep, bend works and squash works. Okay. All right, so I'm going to take that and I'll leave that for now, right? Now, on the cape's going to be a little bit different. We're going to use the wave deformer. And again, whatever happens within the range of the deformer will apply to the geometry. In this case, I have an amplitude setting, which by default is set to 0, which means there is no wave, right? if I create an amplitude, like 0.2 is a bit much, I'll go 0.15, right, or 0.12. What you use is up to you. So that sets how much wave, and then offset is what actually applies the wave. And you'll notice that it's applying from the center, right? So in this case, we want to take this and we want to move it towards the beginning of the cape, right? So that it all happens from the center out. But as a result of moving this, I should have said the neck of the cape, but you get the idea. As a result of moving this, part of this is not in the deformer. It doesn't deform back here. It just moves up and down, right? So we need to scale this up in order to make sure to encompass the geometry. So I'm just going to scale this up like this. Now, if I do this on a full scale, my wave gets much larger because I'm making this larger on Y, right? Technically, if I want to dial that back again, I can scale that down. It's not actually affecting the amplitude, although it's having the effect of affecting the amplitude, right? The amplitude is still set at 0.12, but it's been scaled down like this. If I take that all the way to 0, it's not going to apply it at all, right? So if I play with this offset, now I get a nice smooth flap, right? Now I can't keep it from moving up and down the neck, but there is a way to do that, right? What I could do is I could delete this. And again, I'm just doing this for the sake of demonstration. And you can apply this deformer not just to the cape by itself as a whole, but if I select vertices and I highlight all the way up to the base of the cape, right? I'm just adding some vertex selection here. And I might even see if it'll work with a soft select on. I'm not sure if that'll affect it incrementally. I might even dial this back to test that theory a little bit more. I haven't tried that before, so I'm going to try that with a soft select. If it doesn't work, that's fine. It's not a big deal. But now that I have the vertices selected, I'm going to apply the deformer to the vertices. So I'm going to do the wave again. I'm going to move that to the center. I'm going to scale it out on the other two axes because I'll end up scaling that down anyway. So I'll just do that. And I'll take this back to 0.12. It didn't really do the soft selection, so that's fine. So in that case, I would just dial that back, undo the soft selection, and add those. There's ways to make it act like a soft selection, but you know, and I'll apply the wave again, right? Not a big deal. You can actually how it affects the vertices, similar to when you, well, we haven't gotten into weight painting, but kind of like, well, weight painting. There's really no other way to describe it. So I'm just going to, that's fine. Don't worry about that if you don't use a soft select or whatever. I'm just applying it there. I'm going to do 0.12. And so now, if I apply this twist, this may not work perfectly, but you can see that because the cape is staying within the realm of my wave, oops, it's still affecting it. And when I do my offset, it still works, right? And this was what we didn't have by applying this individually to the geometry, was the ability to have the cape follow along and still work properly, right? That's why I applied these to the group here and then to the cape individually, right? I might take this deformer and put it into the group, and then I'm just going to take that and zero these back out to get this back to default. Come on, mouse. Now, the offset is what, like I said, is what controls the actual flapping of the cape. If you want to play with the amplitude over, over time, you can do that. If you do the wavelength, that'll be how much that sine wave is affected. You can play with that. But once you have it set, I would recommend locking down everything but offset, right? So right click, lock and hide selected. Now, we have our deformers group. We don't want to see these as an animator, right? I'm going to hide these, Control H to hide. And I'm going to take and create a simple control system. Okay, I'm going to create a NURBS primitive circle. We're going to be using a lot of these over our quarter here. I'm going to create this circle and just scale it up, and I'm just going to call this, I don't think this is where, this part isn't in the book. This is just a simple control system to actually control these without having to select the deformers, right? So I'm going to call this main_CTRL. Again, when it comes to naming conventions, you want to do lowercase on the first word, _CTRL. That defines what type of object it is. The geometry has _geo, although it doesn't have it here because it's been referenced in, but that's okay. And stuff like that, right? So I still have history on this, so I want to go ahead and delete my history. I want to close my little nonlinear window. And I want to freeze my transformations. Modify, freeze transformations. So what we're going to do here is we want to, as I've created a deformers group and a geo group, I want to create a controls group. So even though I have one control, you want everything to be organized, right? So I'm going to take this one control, hit Control G to group it, and I'm going to call it controls_GRP. And what we want our controller to do is to move our character around like that, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called a constraint. If you've dealt with parenting one object to another, you know that when you move one object, the other object moves with it, right? Similar with these constraints. You move one object, the constrained object moves with it, but it's not done through hierarchy. It's done through a constraint node, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to constrain my geo group to this main control. So I select the main control. When it comes to constraints, you always select the controller, whatever is being the controller, whether it's an actual NURBS curve or another object or whatever. The controller is selected first, and then you either shift click the object that you're controlling or control click the group that you're controlling, and you apply the constraint. Okay, so I'm going to select the controller, control click in the outliner the geo group. And these constraints are found in the rigging menu system. Okay, so I'm going to go to my modeling drop down here and switch over to rigging. And here are your constraints. I'm going to do a parent constraint. What's up, man?
I needed help with the
Okay. I'm actually finishing up the toothbrush rig demo video for that class. So if you want to set up, I'll be done here in a minute and I'll be able to help you out. All right. So I selected the main control click the geo group, and I applied constrain parent. And what happens is when I move this controller around, it moves with it. But what's going on with the cape? Well, if I unhide my deformers group, Shift H, and I move my main controller, you'll notice that the deformers stay behind. I need the deformers to move with it, right? So what I can do, since my geo group already has a constraint applied, right? You can see that here. And these attributes, translate and rotate, are turned blue, which means they are constrained. If you mouse over it, it says constrained. Scale is not. We'll deal with that here in a minute. But what I can do is I can take my deformers group and I can move it into, if I middle click and drag onto the geo group, I can parent the deformers group into the geo group, right? So when I select my main control, it all moves with it. And so all my deformers still work, right? I'm going to hide those deformers again. So what I wanted to be able to do is I wanted to be able to move my character. I want to be able to rotate my character. And I want to be able to scale my character. But my scale doesn't work, right? Because, as I said, parent constraint, if you look at the options, only does translate and rotate. It does not do scale. So what I want to do, again, is take my main controller and apply a scale constraint, right, to the same group. So I select my main controller, control click geo group, constrain, scale. Now, when I move it, I rotate it, and I scale it, it all works. If I look at my deformers, you'll see that they're going along with it. And all of my attributes still work. Okay, so I'm going to set this back to 0. I'm going to set my scale back to 1. And I'm going to hide my deformers group again. So now that I have that, I need to set this. Do you want to watch this while I'm doing it? I can put it up on the screen and you can just kind of follow along while I finish up. Or do you want to work on other things and we'll come back to it?
I want to knock out the trophy.
Okay.
I know they're both due on the same day.
Yeah. Okay. I just thought I'd give you the option since I'm working on it.
So does Maya 23 now work?
I think it works now. I'm working on 2023 currently. So
I can't remember.
You probably use 2022. So you'd have to set your project directory, but
Because I know I did one. I know I I'd like it, because I know that you can use 23 on the administrator setup. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Give me a few. I'm almost done. Okay. So I have the move, rotate, and scale working, but I still need to be able to control my end angle, my bend, and all that stuff with my controller, not by selecting the deformers. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some attributes. Okay. I'm going to select this controller and I'm going to go into the channel box. I'm going to go to edit, add attribute. And this gives me a little add attribute window. And what I want to do is I want to just create some attributes that I'm going to use. Okay, I'm going to just type twist and I'll just click add. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to say bend, add. I'm going to say squash, add. I'm going to say wave, or you can say cape or whatever. And then that's the last one. So I'm going to click OK. And you can see that these attributes have been added here. They don't do anything yet, right? Okay, when I play with them, they don't do anything because they're not connected to anything. What we want to do is we want to connect them so that these attributes control each of these attributes, right? End, angle, bend, and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to what's called the connection editor. And I'm going fast because I know that you guys can pause the video and go back and stuff like that. But the connection editor is a general editor. So Windows General Editors Connection Editor. And what this does is this puts a direct connection between two attributes, right? It's like math, the transitive property of algebra, right? A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C, right? If this attribute is 5, it has a direct connection to this attribute, which means that this attribute is also 5, right? Okay, so it's literally just taking whatever value this is and putting it over here, right? But without that connection, my controller can't control these attributes. So what I'm going to do is you can see that I have my start angle, end angle, low bound, high bound right here. What I want to do is I want this to be my I want to use my twist 1, not twist 1 handle. So this input is the twist 1. So if I select this twist 1 handle and I hit the down arrow, if I remember correctly, let me see here. No, that's not doing it. Okay, so what I was hoping I would be able to do this simply, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Windows Node Editor. Okay, now what this node editor is, if I select my twist 1 handle and click this input output connections button, right, the little 2 arrows right there, it's going to show me, if I hit F to focus on this, it's going to show me the twist 1 handle that I have here. And technically, it's also showing me the wave, the bend, and stuff like that, right? What I want to find here is this twist 1, right? With this twist 1 selected, I'm going to click reload right. And that gives me my start angle, end angle, low bound, and high bound. Okay, so I wanted to go in to my twist one handle, select it, hit this to map it out, and then zoom in until I find the twist one node, right? That's what I was trying to get to, was that directly, right? And then I click reload right. This is where everything is connected to. What I want to have connected from is my controller. And so I'm going to put that on the left, right? The controller attributes that I created are at the bottom. So with this having loaded in here, I click twist and I connect it to the end angle, which is the attribute that I have that I want to connect, right? I'm going to go ahead and select my bend handle. Actually, all of the rest of the attributes are right here. So I'm just going to click bend one, reload right. What we're controlling with this is the curvature. So bend to curvature. I'm going to go here to squash one, select that, reload right. Squash, come on, reload right. There we go. Squash is going to control factor, right? And then the last thing I had was wave, reload right. Wave is controlling offset. So if after we've done that, if I select my main controller, you'll see my outputs are right there. All I need to do is select this attribute, middle click and drag, and you'll see that I have my twist. If I do my bend, middle click and drag, I have my bend, my squash, and my wave, all on a single controller, and I don't have to select these outputs. So that's it. I'm going to save as version 2. What I want to have capable here, right? And I'm not quite done with my organization over here. But what I want to have capable here is I want to be able to grab my controller. I should have had my geometry. I'll go ahead and select my 2 geometry, put that on a layer, just like we did for the trophy. I'll call this geo layer and reference that so I can't select it, right? All I can select is my controller. I can move my character, I can rotate my character, I can scale my character, and the attributes work like that. If I zero this out, zero out my translate and rotate, set my scale back to 1, resetting my character back to its default position. The last thing I want to do here is take these 2 groups, which is all I should see, and group those. And this is my toothbrush underscore GRP. This is my main character group. So ultimately, what we're doing is we're moving everything into a single group. Everything is contained and, you know, all that stuff. If you want to go in and hide your geo from being selectable, you can do that, similar to what we did for the trophy. Again, sorry, not the group. If I go to the transform node, I can go to display and hide in outliner, go to cape, hide in outliner. You know, I can do that, right? That's a little bit cleaner. I literally can't select it anywhere. You know, without a little work, right? So there it is. It works. I'm going to do a final save, version 3. I'm going to do a final save and overwrite my final. Do I want to replace it? Yes. And then the last thing I want to do, according to the assignment, is I want to play with the controls that I've created, right? So I'm creating a pose of my character, a superhero pose, right? If I want to make him nice and big, I want to move him over here. I want to rotate him a little bit, right? And then I want to play with these handles or these controls. I'm going to turn him toward the camera. I'm going to bend him back and do a little bit of a takeoff pose and apply some wave to it, right? I've scaled him up out of his cape deformer a little bit. Don't worry about it too much. And then just, you know, set a really nice dynamic pose for your character and save as. And this will be pose. So that's the assignment for the toothbrush rig. Right. Underscore pose, create a heroic action pose of your toothbrush. Right. Don't forget your separate rig and separate pose files, right? You're going to have both your final and your pose, 2 separate files, right? So there you go. That's it. So as soon as this video is done, I'll post it, but I said I would do the the trophy. I would do the trophy creation again. So I'm going to turn on the projector so Richard can see this in the classroom because he wants me to help him with his trophy. So
Are you still recording? Because I can't tell if it's like,
no, I'm recording.
it's mostly just like, the only thing I'll step on now before we start was I already modeled the trophy and all. It's just like doing stuff for groups, like tilt left,
Oh, okay.
tilt right, and the rotate. What was the other one? Third one called?
I just had tilt left, tilt right, and rotate. I think that was it.
So I accidentally made 4 groups. How do I delete one of them?
Give me a. Well, technically, if it's one of the top groups, right, that you want to delete, you have to select the second group, hit Shift P to unparent it, and then you can select the group and just hit delete. So, all right. So just to, I'm going to just recreate this,
It kind of, every time when I try to, when I remove the parents, I have to delete it and then model.
Okay, give me a second because I want to get this done for the video and then I'll be done. It'll only take a minute. All right, so going back to modeling again, I'm not setting a project directory, and this is for the video. I'm not setting a project directory. I'm not creating I just created a new file. And how I created the trophy, and I'm only going over the creation of the trophy because the rest of the entire trophy project is in those first 10 pages of the book, right? So I'm going to do create curve tools, CV curve tool. Again, I'm going to hold down X to click at the center of my grid. And then I'm going to pop over to a front camera like that. I'm going to hold down X to continue creating my curve out here until I'm happy with how wide that is. And then I create a couple more points to curve that back. The more points here, the more control I have over the shape of the curve. I'm just going to bring that in to the center. And then I'm going to curve it back out to create the actual cup. Create some good points here. And then I'm going to curve that down in. And I'm going to finish it off by holding down X to snap to the center of my grid again and hit enter. All right. Again, I can reshape that if I'm not happy with anything. Like I feel like it's a little bit squishy, so I might scale that up to make a taller goblet. And here's my curve, right? This is a big one. I can always scale it later if I wanted to, right? But I'm going to do freeze transformations. I don't really have any history on it, so deleting history isn't going to do anything. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go surfaces, revolve, options. As I said in class yesterday, we want to do polygons, quads, count, and I'm doing 1600. Again, your number is up to you. Click revolve. Now, as I said, this geometry is tied to the curve at this point. All right, so if I right click and go to control vertex, this is what happens when you don't hold down snap at the center of the world. It creates a hole in your revolve, right? So this last point has to be snapped to 0 on your grid, right? If I look at this from the side view, you know, it's not on 0, right? So it's creating a hole. Same thing with the first one. If I select the first one and I pull that off of 0, it creates a hole, right? I don't want a hole, right? So snapping to the center is really important when it comes to that. And again, if I want to go in and change how much detail I have, 1600 is good. I might want to take it up to 3200. I can type in that, but I get a lot of detail down here and it still doesn't look good up here. So again, using a curve to create this is just a starting point for a model, right? So that was that, right? I delete my history and I delete my curve. I name my model trophy _ geo. Yeah.
What's the purpose of deleting history?
Everything that you do to an object gets held onto, and it just stays there, right? It just stays there in history, and so eventually,
Wouldn't it kind of be a good thing to still have it in case you?
only in certain instances. Only in certain instances, like if I have a low res version of an object, right? Like if I needed to, I'm just going to undo the deletion of the history, right? If I have a 500 count object, right? And this is going to be viewed from far away.
You don't have modifiers. Maya doesn't have modifiers.
No, it has history.
That explains.
Yeah, it has history. So I can take this if I wanted to keep my NURBS tessellate node, right? It works everything with nodes. If I wanted to keep my NURBS tessellate node, I can set a control for level of detail. And as I get closer to the object with my camera, it can up the level of detail to make it more higher resolution. In instances like that, you want to hold on to the history so that you can control the level of detail of your object or your character, right? So there are instances where you may want to hold on to history, but if you've gotten your object to the point where you're happy with it, you delete your history. It saves on file sizes so that Maya runs more efficiently and things like that, right? So if I know that this is the highest level of detail that I'm going to go on my object, I delete my history. And plus, if I don't delete my history, it's going to be forever controlled by this curve. And I don't want that to happen either. So I delete my history, and then I can delete my curve without it deleting the actual object. If I delete the curve without having deleted the history, there's a possibility it would actually delete the object because the curve is no longer there to control it. Know what I mean? So anyway, that's creating the trophy for the sake of the video. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. I'm here till 1. As soon as this is available, I'll make it available on the stream. And I'm currently in B112. If you need me, you can either find me here or in the office or something like that. I'm going to help Richard out. Later.